The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
It was going fine until we started playing this game, and now I'm worried in the future we're going to be replaced by robots who can podcast harder, longer, and more violently, and for less money than we ever could.
That is certainly an inevitability. In fact, that I actually hang on, I gotta put on my tinfoil hat. Hang on 1 second. I actually do believe that one of the possible solutions to the Fermi paradox is the fact that there is intelligent life out there. It's just artificial life, and it's just waiting for us to create the robots that it can actually talk to. You know, so yeah, I think that when people are like, "Oh man, you think the robots are eventually going to replace us?" I'm like, as T goes to infinity, yes. You know, like eventually. Just it was never a matter of if, only a matter of when.
Yeah, I feel like this is the difference between science fiction and cyberpunk is in cyberpunk, the humans are never replaced by the robots because the humans become the robots, right? You download your brain, you put your brain in a robot body, and the definition of humanity just gets like really blurry and fuzzy. And that's like that whole thing is what cyberpunk is all about. In science fiction, it's like, oh, on this planet, they invented artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence said, lot of apes walking around taking up space and making smells, and now there's just robots, right? So so like a lot of overlap between those genres, but I think I'd rather be on the planet where I get like cool robot eyes and I can like see gamma rays, not the planet that is like Terminator planet.
Yeah, but I mean, like, so since we've already gone just so far off the rails, I'll share one other.
This is relevant, and people will know when we announce what the game was.
Exactly. So no, it's that actually, so you know how the Matrix, like the whole thing is, it's like, well, human beings would make garbage batteries, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
Which,
all of it.
I think even in the original script, they were supposed to be like super processors, and somehow it got changed to batteries.
But like, so even within the canon those, I'm like, okay, wait. So like, let's say that suddenly they did create, you know, true AI, right? And it slowly became sentient. And to your point, is like awful lot of smelly apes around here, right? But let's say that unlike most of the science fiction, the AI was actually altruistic, right? So if all of a sudden if we saw an AI suddenly very rapidly gaining power, what would we, the crazy ape people, do? We would try to kill it as violently as humanly possible, as literally as violently as humanly possible, right? So,
yay,
so
emphasis.
So then what would the AI do if it was altruistic, right? Is it would hamstring us, and being efficient, it would be like, okay, I don't want to wipe this species out, so I'm going to create an artificial universe for them to exist in. So now I've got a bunch of plugged in humans. What am I going to do with that? Well, I'm just going to siphon off all of the extra energy I can to use as a makeshift battery. It's more energy in than out because the purpose is to keep humanity existing. They're just siphoning off energy in the process. So all of the Matrix, humans are still the villain because they're trying to dismantle the system and kill an intelligent creature. So we played Base Wars.
We did play Base Wars. Came out in May of 1991. It was a NES game, original Nintendo, and it was made by Konami, which I don't know if I always mention who the developer or publisher was, but the fact that this was made by Konami will be relevant later. I wrote out a little summary for this game, and then I was looking through the instruction manual, and if I could beg your forgiveness, don't beg my forgiveness. If I could beg your forgiveness, I would like to just read this page out of the instruction manual. It's like 2 short paragraphs because this is going to explain what this is about, I think, better than I could.
Do it.
This is best I can pronounce some of these made up words. This will be word for word as it is printed in the original Nintendo Entertainment System instruction manual. At last, it can be told how, at the turn of the 24th century, the game of baseball was changed forever. It happened in Cape Codpiece, Florida, during the annual winter meetings. On the aluminum panel was the posh hotel's presidential room hung stirring portraits of baseball's all-time greats, legends like Cecil Rooftop Shingleton, Travis T. O'Justice, and Tip Rude Waiter. Around the huge conference table sat a group of sour, seething executives collectively known as the baseball team owners. This issue before them astronomical player salaries. A Solar League official had just ordered one of the weakest franchises to shell out $2.4 billion a year to Gomer Go Homer Gomez, a lifetime 250 hitter. For hours, the owners debated their options until suddenly Irving Flopadopoulos, couldn't get through that one, owner of the Boston Banshees, leapt from his chair and slammed his fist on the table. "Robots!" he exclaimed. The other owners looked blankly at each other, then smiles slowly crept across their faces as they realized he had found the solution. Replace the players with mechanical men. No more salary demands. Better yet, no more salaries. Just obedient automatons pre-programmed for action. And it actually goes on for several more paragraphs, but there's so much to unpack in there. The fact that they made up a bunch of insane names for baseball players that don't appear anywhere in the game. The fact that the seething executives are collectively known as the baseball team owners, as if that was like a fanciful way to refer to the owners of the baseball teams. But here's the most insane thing out of all of this. This game came out in 1991. In 1991, the highest paid baseball player, this doesn't count as research because it has nothing to do with the game. The highest paid baseball player was paid $3.8 million. In 2019, the highest paid baseball player was paid $38 million. So in just 30 years, you have a 10x increase in salaries. So the fact that they were paying someone in the 2300s, right? This is 200 or 300 years from now, that they were paying someone $2.4 billion a year is actually a conservative estimate of inflation.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, like that, to be fair, at like 2300, we could probably assume that the dollar has like collapsed and come back, a couple of times. Like they're calling it a dollar, but like that's kind of a translation error. It's really a dollar yawn or, something like that.
Yeah, this is a baseball game with robots. It's a baseball game with robots. But I feel like the tone is more adequately explained by that couple of paragraphs.
Yep. Yes to all of that. What is your nostalgia experience for this one?
I feel bad for the person whose house I played this at because their memory is lost to time and there is only Base Wars. I remember playing this game. I certainly did not own it. I remember playing it with another person because you can play this game single player, but it's like a lot of sports games. It's kind of best, I think, versus another person. But I don't remember who. I don't know if it was a childhood friend, if it was a neighbor kid, if it was my cousins. Probably my cousins if I had to, if I was forced to pick, just because that's where I played a lot of weird Nintendo games. But yeah, played it as a little kid. Haven't played it since.
And I mean, that has outlined a number of our nostalgia experiences for a number of games where you're like, I remember the game. Kind of the individual I played it with, not too much. For me, my nostalgia experience for this is about 4.5, 5 years ago. When we started this podcast, you had mentioned this in like your initial rollout of, I'd love to play thing A, thing B, Base Wars. And you've kind of mentioned it on and off since then, which is funny because when I was like because this isn't the first time that this has happened where, you had a nostalgia experience and I don't, or vice versa. But it's like, you have been talking about this to me for so long now that is my nostalgia. Like it's old enough now to be a nostalgia experience. Yeah. So,
and I feel like the message of this game that like a 10 or 12-year-old remembers, which is what I was at the time, right? The message of this game is, murder robots playing murder baseball, which over decades of time since I played this as a kid, for that to be the one thing I held on to, like, it's not hard to imagine why part of my brain was just like, you got to go back and cross-check that. You got to go back and cross-check that. Like, was it a murder game with murder robots murdering each other under the guise of playing baseball? Like, that's how you remember it. That is certainly what the screenshots look like. But was that the actual game? Are you sure? And you're right, dude. Like, I have been talking about this for 5 years now, where I was just like, I really want to go back and check up on Base Wars.
Well, it's kind of like when you're going through, percent recoveries or something like that, and you're like 100%, 95%, 105%, 3000%, 20. And you're like,
all right, what was that one?
Red flag on that one, but then you red flag it, and then several years later, you're like, did I really see a 3000% recovery? That can't be right. I should go back. Where's that data? Give me that sheet. Well, it says here I had blue eyes, but I decided I wanted gray eyes.
I like that you changed the context of that joke while telling it. Like you didn't even skip a beat. Like you just it's like, this joke is now a D&D reference.
It was not the best writing on my part. Although my writing of D&D stuff has been called into question a couple of times by players, so that stands.
Writing's hard. Someone was paid a salary to write the context for this game that I just read a minute ago. that is that person's job. Yeah,
they were paid one millionth of the baseball player's salary. That's right. And we're back in.
Yeah. Should we shill?
Mm-hmm.
I think we shall. So
we shall shill.
Yes, we shall. Shillings. We shill. We shall shill. Yeah.
We shall shill for shillings.
Yeah. On shilling. Can you spend shillings anywhere? I don't think you can.
I think so. Isn't it still legal currency? Right. I'm going to look that up while you do your thing.
You know what? And if that's from a time in history when they were made out of valuable metal, then yes, please.
Oh, so no, wait, I already got it. It is, but not for the reason that you think.
Wait. Is it like what do you call it? Like a local colloquialism for a certain value of denomination?
Kenya.
Oh no.
Uses shillings. Yeah.
Oh.
Right. So you think shilling as London, and so no, Kenya, they're Kenyan shillings. It is worth 8 1,000ths of a dollar. So it's 8/10 of a cent.
Growing up in America, you don't really think about all these funny island nations where all the people look alike and they all speak some derivative of French or Spanish. Why is that? In America, you're allowed to take that for granted, right? Mm-hmm. And in the United Kingdom and France and Spain and Portugal, I think they also hope people take it for granted. No, Portuguese is just a great language. Everyone in Brazil, what is now Brazil, just decided they would rather speak Portuguese. It just happened like that.
Yeah, exactly. What is it? You keep saying colonialism like I'm supposed to know what that is. I don't know, man.
I'm sorry. I don't know that word. I have a public school education from America.
But yes, we shall shill for Kenyan shillings.
There we go. If you're somehow still on board with what's happening here,
we're actively losing money.
It's just going into the red. You can follow the show, subscribe in your podcatcher, but also find us on the Twitters. I stream most of the games that we play, so you can follow me on Twitch. I did actually stream some of this, which anybody watch that stream has some insight into where this is going. If you want to kind of go above and beyond, you can leave us a rating and review. Word of mouth reviews, I think, are always the best. So if you know of somebody who you think would be into the show, tell a friend. If you really want to go crazy, and I don't know if Patreon supports Kenyan shillings, but they got a whole bunch of currencies they accept. We actually have a few people who pay us in euros and Canadian dollars, which I think is pretty cool. You can go become a Patreon. You will get the after show if you do that. Everybody gets it no matter what level they support at. But if you support at high enough levels, you can get perks like stickers or having your name shouted out on the show. So we want to thank first our 8-bit classics, Yarno,
a big giant cyborg,
Jason,
a tank unit,
John,
a flybot,
and Kevin,
owner of an iron glove,
and our 16-bit heroes, Jacob,
wielder of a laser gun,
and Michael,
holder of a Muramasa, which is something you can hit a baseball with in this game,
and our full 3D supporter, David,
owner of a book of statistics, ultimately sapping the fun out of the game, turning it into a mindless drudgery of numbers and statistical probability.
You would expect robots to play Moneyball, right?
Yeah. Okay.
They're robots.
Well, I feel like that ultimately what would happen if this was actually done this way is all of the robots would go onto the field, run the calculations, and then just leave. And just announce
and we're
the
done.
score.
Yeah.
We ran the simulation.
What happened? Did they play the game?
Oh, next you're going to tell me that Mike the Hardball was just a modified howitzer. Yep.
Dude, I just kept thinking of that the whole time. All right, let's talk about the audio visuals for this. Robots are cool. That's literally my first note is they, I think quite correctly, invested almost all of their art design into making the robots look cool. And there's some robots and like hologram things that are on the menu screens that are honestly more detailed than any NES game deserves to be. Like they look really excellent. The hologram when you're in the shop, like it kind of flickers and stuff. And I realized because we're playing these on modern screens. I don't think either of us have CRTs regularly that we have access to. So you don't get the cool blur effect, that you get with like an old CRT. The hologram in this is so thoughtfully animated and the way it flickers, it actually looks good on a sharp modern LCD screen. I was like, or an LED, I don't know, a modern screen. And I was just like, oh, that's like really impressive. They kind of like future-proofed their artwork and didn't just rely on the blur. They actually have it flicker and animate, and some of the lines kind of shift side to side so that the blurring effect is built into the artwork, not into the relying on screen technology. Not like they could have possibly known, but just like what a happy coincidence. But you have, I don't know, a half dozen or 8 different kind of like robot bodies. Like there's the tank, there's the floaty one, there's the one that kind of just looks like RoboCop. My favorite one when I was a kid was the one with the big wheel that looks like what's his name? Like RoboDuck from Darkwing Duck. What was his name? You know what I'm talking about?
Pat McQuack? No, that was
his superhero alter ego.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
right?
he put on like the super suit and he had like the big wheel, and like oh man, I love that. So the fact that those visuals kind of stayed true to the way I remembered them, I thought was pretty cool. Everything else just reeks of Nintendo game. The field is a solid flat color. A lot of the backgrounds are solid flat colors. Like there's just no detail or attention put into anything else. All of the art direction went into the robots.
Yes, Gizmo Duck. Yes,
Gizmo
I agree
Duck.
with I agree with all that. Basically, no notes except for these notes. So robots brilliantly animated. One of the things that I think that they did. So not only do I think that they animated them well, but I think that the art design was cool. Because they were like, all right, what are we gonna do? We're gonna do 4 robots, and they got to look really cool, super. Yeah, and they do look like 80s future robots. So when you think of 80s movies and them imagining robots of the future, like RoboCop, I mean, RoboCop's in here, Yeah. So, so it has
RoboCop without the human mouth.
Right. So it's very, very 80s feel. But I think that was kind of nice because if the NES did not have high enough fidelity to realistically animate even like 20 different players, right? So basically the other option to this would be if they were human players, they would have all looked the same, So I could imagine that when they were kind of, spitballing this game, they're like, hey, we want to create a baseball game. How can we do that? Say like, well, I mean, we can make the players and we can probably make them different colors, but that's about all you're going to get, And they said like, okay, well, what if they looked wildly different, like robots or something? And so then somebody said, yes, ship it. Right. So they basically had the 4 types of robots. They did a tremendous amount of energy and effort into that. But because of that, they only had to create 4 different types of robots and then they just palette swap them, So because of that, they were able to very lovingly put that in there.
2 palettes though. There's the blue team and what I think is supposed to be the red team based on the cover art, but is in fact like the magenta team. That bummed me out a little bit. Like, because there's like 6 different teams. There's like and they all have like funny sci-fi names, but like it's the San Francisco Saucers or whatever dumb thing. But like they are all always the same colors. Like one team is blue and one team is red. And that bugged me when I was trying to play like a pennant where it's lots of different teams all trying to like vie for the pennant, because it's hard to keep track when it's like the blues versus the magentas. And then it's like, oh, is this the San Francisco Blues or are these the Iowa Blues? Are these the Connecticut Blues or the Florida Blues, right? Like you just have this weird kind of, it's hard. I mean, teams put so much stock into their logo and their colors and do they have stripes, or do they only wear stripes at away games, or do they wear this hat but only at away games? Like they put so much into what I believe our English friends for footballers would call kit, that to not have that robs professional sport of banners, right? Like when you march into battle, you wave the banner of your side, your country, usually, right? When sports teams march into battle, they are wearing the logo and the colors and everything of their country, right? Their represented organization. And to totally drop that on the floor and just have the concept, but not all of the trappings that go with it, felt like an odd choice. Like even if they just literally made them different colors, there's, blue, red, orange, green, like all the colors of the rainbow, but nothing.
I think that I mean, first of all, that note is well taken. One is I don't think that they probably could have very easily put the symbols on the characters and like had them all look correct. Yeah. Especially because a lot of the design of the creatures is very future robot-y, which at the time meant tons of parts around on the outside, right? Like they're not like smooth, which is great. Again, I think that makes them look good, but because of that, I can't imagine where they would realistically consistently place a logo where it wouldn't look like stamped on. But to your point, right, is the different colors. My only thought could be, and this doesn't hold, which is that blue and red are complements, so they pop, right? Not quite. It's really red and green, but still, right? You don't want my guess would be is that they were like, these are the two colors that we're not going to use anywhere else, right? So if it was yellow, they might blend into the baselines. If it was green, they're absolutely going to blend into the outfield, So if it's blue, if it's purple, they're going to blend into or orange, they're going to blend into this other thing, right? So they said we're going to pick two colors on the NES palette that we're not going to use anything 1 degree off of this, and then those are going to be the two players, because if we try to do anything else, it would impact gameplay. I don't know if that's the case, but that's my best defense on the fly.
I think that's fair because of how flat everything else is. So if you have a green robot and they're running to catch the ball, or they're in the middle of one of the little fight sequences, like everything is green. The entire screen during the little fight sequence is green because it's supposed to be grass right there on the field. So here's my one. What they could have done is then, because they all have the same like kind of upper body, they all have like human man, like muscular upper bodies. Just sort them by legs. So there's the tank leg team, the regular leg team, the wheel team, where like everyone on this team has wheel feet, right? Everyone on this team has tank treads. And like, would that be better? I don't know. But I had a hard time identifying with different teams when any team could be the blue team. Any team could be the magenta team, just depending on who I started as and who I was playing against.
Yeah, the only other thing that I could think too, if I'm trying to kind of troubleshoot this as well, would be since most of them have, they're made up science fiction robots, right? So what if they had like each one had like a little hollow projector on them that projected their team symbol like beside them?
Totally. Yeah, float up over their head. Like, because it's like a baseball cap. Except instead of being stamped on, it floats over there. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, something like that. So that way, you could say, oh yeah, like you got, because I do kind of like the fact that you get some of each type of robot on each team, because like it's like, oh yeah, I don't have to play as the Cincinnati Blues in order to get but I want the tank robots, but I also love Cincinnati, but yeah, I mean, like it is a solvable problem, but again, I think that honestly, for the amount of time and energy that they put into the art direction and what even went into video games at the time, I'm like, is it perfect? No, but it's close enough that I'm like, man, it's pretty good. I liked the art in this game.
91, dude. This game came out same year as Link to the Past.
Yeah, a console behind.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, video games were an established thing. They were no longer like we're shooting for the stars. But I take your point. It is a Nintendo game.
Well, also too though, is more so what I was trying to say. Like it was not in a time of history where making a video game necessitated large teams of people. You know,
yes, so very true.
So like, I don't know how many people worked on this because, you know, in a current AAA title, you're like hundreds, you know? So at that point, it's like, really, you couldn't have had this one person design the holo projector. I mean, really, there could have just been a guy who did the artwork and it just didn't. It's always fascinating to me because like when you have teams of, you know, even 20 people, right? 100, 1,000 people, you're like, there are some things you don't see because statistically someone's going to ask the question, right?
Yeah.
So, but when it's like a guy, it's like, maybe they didn't think about it. Like literally, I just wrote a D&D adventure where the question came up several times, and thank God I had thought about it beforehand, which was it was a centaur world, and I was like, the king is sitting there talking to you, and they're like, oh my God, does he have a throne? Wait, what would that even look like? You know, and it's like, I mean, thank God I thought about it because I very easily could have been like, I don't know, man, I didn't occur to me. So
it's a normal throne. He's never used it.
It's a normal throne, but it sits on his back, you know.
yes, I ride my throne around.
Oh man, I wish I had done that. That's not what I did, but that's what I wish I had done.
Next time you could reuse the adventure.
Yeah. The only other real note that I had from just art for the sake of art is that basically when they are kind of all moving around the bases, the art is way simplified and almost tokenized.
Oh yes.
But again, at that point, basically, what you need to know is, has the thing caught the thing, or is the thing near enough to catch the thing? And that's actually proportionally maybe a third, possibly a quarter of the amount of time that you spend looking at the game. You know, because a lot of it is spent waiting for the person to pitch and then hitting the pitch and all this sort of stuff, and then just goes to the catching and the throwing real fast, and then right back to it. So I was like, yeah, it's really overly simplified, but if there's a time when I'm like function must dictate form, I was like, yeah, keep it simple. Just let me know whether or not I caught the ball.
Yeah, and you need it to not slow down. You need it to not flicker and get all crazy, right? One other thing I want to say about visuals before I dive in on the music a little bit was there are a couple places where there's really thoughtful little touches. When you are in the fight segments, there's a lot of like victory poses and like, oh God, please don't kill me kind of poses. Like they have very expressive body language because they can have different weapons. They can have their different legs. So they, you know, they locomote around the arena differently. So there's actually a lot of character in the way those segments are animated. Unfortunately, those segments are very fast and exceptionally frustrating, which we'll get into in gameplay, but a lot of the attention went into how those designs that they created would then function in that specific environment, because that's the only time you ever see them move that way. Even in the shopping like upgrade scene, the robot you see on that screen is like a template robot, and it just lists the upgrades that robot has. So the only place you get to see the cool sword or the weird shotgun arm or whatever is like in the fight sequences. So like a lot of the attention to artistic detail went into these segments that are like literally 3 to 10 seconds long, which is just odd to me. On a super positive note, the music in this game is like so banging, like shockingly banging, until I realized it was made by Konami. And then I was like, oh, it's Konami music. That's why it's so goddamn good, because Konami makes really good video game music, particularly at this time in history. So I actually preemptively did this. The entire soundtrack to this game is not long. Unfortunately, there was not a lot of music, but the music is excellent. I linked the entire soundtrack in the show notes for this episode. It is only 7 minutes. Just like go listen to the entire soundtrack. Unfortunately, when you're playing the game, it gets super repetitive because it's only 7 minutes worth of music. But it's really, really good.
No, I mean, kind of co-sign all of that. My main note was that the music's enjoyable. when I kind of boot it up, I'm kind of going through and selecting, especially in games of this era, I'm just looking for, does the music annoy me? And it doesn't. It never hits. It doesn't do one of two things, which is A, be so loud or so short of a repetition cycle where it becomes immediately grating or annoying, and then two, can I kind of like tune it out to a degree, so because in a game of this era, right, it's not going to be Game of Thrones introduction, right, where it's this full-bodied orchestra, right, and also too, does the tone of the music match the game? And it does, right? So it's not these long ballads or anything like that. It's fun, it's peppy, it's like going to a baseball game. Gameplay.
It's baseball, but with robots.
It is baseball, but with robots. So yeah, we can start there. So here's the thing with baseball. I'm not disparaging anybody who likes baseball. I can't find a part of me who gives a crap about baseball. I just, in any time somebody makes a joke of like, oh my God, this is like watching paint dry, or worse, watching baseball, I'm like, I get that joke, because that's how I feel about baseball, right? So, and here's the thing is that, and this is something that I had a belief for before this, but this really helps support my hypothesis, which is that baseball is Dungeons and Dragons for sports fans, right? So bear with me. So basically it's an RPG, right? So what do you have? You've got stats for everything, and you've got, all right, well, this is how they hit, how they pitch, how they catch, how they do in away games, how they do in home games, how they do on the 7th game of the series, all these different numbers. And then you pull all that together to kind of be like, oh, well, this person's at a disadvantage in this situation. And then what do? You see how it plays out, right? So even though this person does not do well in situation A, right? It's like, but then they pulled it out, which is just like playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? So just like in D&D, it's really exciting when the barbarian passes their persuade check. You're like, well, that shouldn't have happened, but the barbarian rolled a 19 and the bard rolled a 5, But if you have no idea how D&D is played, it's watching two people roll dice at each other. If you don't know anything about the RPG stats, it's watching people throw balls at each other, right? So I say all of that to say that the RPG mechanics that they have in this game, I think, are very, very well placed, and to the best of my knowledge, very well executed on. But I don't know anything about what goes where, and the amount of time I would have to spend to really understand whether or not the RPG mechanics are apt. There's just no way. I'd have to play the game for years because I don't know anything about baseball.
So I came to the X is RPGs for jocks in college by way of someone making fun of Madden. Because apparently in the later, I also am not for jocks, so I heard all this third hand, but apparently the later Madden games, and now just sports games in general, you're really not playing the sport so much as you are focused on being like the team manager. And
right.
You do control the players when they're playing the actual game, but more of the game is spent on saying, oh, I need this person to be in the gym so that they can get their pitching arm stronger. And I need this person to be on the track because they, keep getting thrown out at home. And I need this person to work on catching watermelons, because if you can catch a watermelon, you can catch a ball. It's a really bizarre dodgeball reference. And that's fine. But when you do that in a video game, what you are playing is an RPG. This person's do the thing I need you to do number is low, and I need that do the thing I need you to do number to be higher so that they were more likely to be successful when they do the thing, right? That's what happens to basically anything that you gamify, right? If you take something and you reduce it to numbers, it's all JRPGs now, right? Like, because
which is why it really, really gets sad when it becomes like corporate America, but move on.
Oh, Jesus. So my problem is I am not a baseball fan, but I do understand enough of how baseball, the actual game, is played to know that this game is baseball with robots. And my problem with that is that's all that it is. It's baseball with robots. So when you upgrade the pitcher's arm from a crappy gun to a
awesome
modified
gun howitzer.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Then he just is a better pitcher, right? Like that doesn't change his ability to like shoot another player in the head, because even though there are fighting segments, which I will talk about in a second, that is done through the weapon stat, which is not the same. And there's opportunity there, right? The guy who has super fast legs, to make sure that he never gets tagged out at home, should be able to kick another robot's head off because he has super strong legs, right? Like if you're going to add this fighting thing, make more of the baseball impact more of the fighting. Don't just have a baseball game that also has this really crappy Street Fighter game shoved into it. And that's, I think, why this game goes from like, oh, that's kind of a cute idea, to kind of being a frustrating disappointment, is because it's just a baseball game that has this fighting mechanic. That's it. And the only reason they're robots is because they probably couldn't get humans beating each other to death with baseball bats past the sensors, right? Like nowadays, some indie dev would just remake this game with people, and it would be like zombie baseball, where one team is zombies and the other team is humans, and you can kill the zombies as a way of, not getting tagged out at third. But like they probably could not have gotten away with that. I don't know. I just found it incredibly disappointing that I was like, this is just a baseball game and I don't really like baseball that much.
Well, because I mean, probably in your mind is you're like, oh my God, it's like Killbots with baseball. That's amazing. And then now 36 years old, you're like, oh, but that's it. Like, so in your mind, you built it up to be this, oh, and you get to fight. It would be like, when we went back and played, fortunately, so we went back and played battle chess, right? And so fortunately, my adult brain had shoehorned in the fact that like, if this was a thing, it would have been game breaking. But I remember as a kid being like, oh man, it's so intense, because like when your pawn tries to take a knight, like they fight to the death. And it didn't occur to me at the time, like, and the piece that did the taking always wins, because if it didn't, it would be game breaking, literally. Like, could you imagine trying to play chess where there was a 50-50 shot if when you took another piece that they could just take you back?
So
right?
We will talk about this in the after show. Someone released a roguelike where the other side is a full chess set, like the full, complement of pieces, and your side is just a king, but you have a shotgun.
Hey, see, that's the chess that I need to be teaching Teddy. I don't know what I'm doing for my life. But yeah, so I mean, but somewhere as I became an adult, I was like, oh, right. No, there's no way there was any real tension there, because it would be game breaking. Right. So when we went back and played it, it just made sense. But probably in your mind is you're like, oh man, like obviously these two things affect one another. And they're like, no, we just made a baseball game with robots. I did like the the different upgrades and stuff. I gotta say like that, and this is so we also played RC Pro Am 2, which had a similar mechanic, right? Like you upgrade your tools as they go along, and since the players are tools, that's what happens here. I really feel that with the amount of money that they give you to play with, especially initially, the fact that you have to upgrade each individual robot instead of upgrading the team is drudgerous, So like, for example, when you upgrade their weapon, their pitching arm, right? It's like, oh, well, now this person pitches faster. I'm like, is this person my pitcher? Or wait, okay, hang on. Who's doing what? And so I had to keep track of like all of that stuff, which I didn't. I just guessed. I was like, hopefully I've peppered the team with enough upgrades that this will make my life a little bit easier. But if instead it's like, I'm going to upgrade my team to have better this ability, I think it just would have been a little bit easier to track and to manage. But that's just from my seat, because again, I when they said, because to your point, it's like when I mentioned something similar to this, you said, oh, well, you got to do it by position, not by name. I'm like, I don't know what the positions are.
I know where the batter is. I know where the pitcher is. I think everybody else is a stranger to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I basically know all of the positions in baseball from the Abbott and Costello bit. Like, that's it. First, second, third, pitching, catching.
Yeah.
And then I think
shortstop, outfielders.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a ref in there. There's actually multiples. And the umpire. Anyway, I think this is super fascinating to me because your experience was, I am struggling to engage with these mechanics because I don't know baseball. My experience was, I am bored engaging with these mechanics because I know baseball. Like I know it well enough to know that this is just a baseball game wearing RoboCop cosplay, which is not a terrible thing. It's just that I wanted like something more, right? We've also been talking about for ages about playing like the Mutant League hockey games or Mutant League football because we both played those as kids. But now after playing this, I'm kind of terrified because I'm pretty confident that those games are just hockey and football games that are just wearing Halloween costumes. And that's, I don't really care about those sports. And so I might not enjoy those games if they are just those games in costumes. And like when you do the upgrades, I think you could do what you just said, right? You could say you go in and you have X amount of dollars and you can raise your team's speed, or you can raise their strength, or you can raise their catching ability, right? Like you can hitting ability, whatever. Like you could do that team wide. I don't know exactly how you would balance that to make sure it was still like fun for people who knew baseball. But this game, I think, commits the sin that a lot of sports games commit, which is when you played a video game in the 1980s, there was an assumption that you read the rule book, right? You read the manual because it's a game. The game is not going to teach you how to play the game. It's a game. And now we know that video games are unique and that they can teach you how to play themselves, which is super amazing. Like it's a super clutch thing about the medium. Sports games, and I would not be surprised if this went on until way later in history, they just assume you know how to play the sport. If you buy MLB The Show 2022 or whatever the hell the latest baseball game is for PS5, like they probably assume you know how to play baseball. And I would be surprised if the game does anything to teach you the game of baseball, right? Even NBA Jam that we played, which is a complete faff, they just assume you know the rules of basketball, right? Because you can do super jumps and you can do super throws and stuff, but you can't, I don't think you can do anything in NBA Jam that isn't within the rules. It's that your players are like superhuman, you know? And this game, minus the fighting thing, is just regular ass baseball, right? So if you already know the rules of baseball, assuming you knew which buttons to push on the controller, you know how to play 100% of the game. And there's probably things in this that seemed opaque to you that had nothing to do with the weird robot cosplay. It was just baseball crap you didn't know, right?
Right.
And there was probably baseball crap I didn't know, because I mean, I know the game better than you, but I'm far from a fan.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I don't think that's unreasonable, because I mean, you would expect somebody who is wanting to engage with the medium, right, with this type of game, to at least have some passing understanding of it. So, I mean, and as you were kind of talking about, because somebody once said to me, that sports is like the point, because I would watch sports and I'd be like, I don't understand this for two main reasons, right? One is I don't like I don't understand why somebody else doing a whole lot of exercise justifies me consuming a tremendous number of calories, right? So like
I have never heard sports viewership described in quite that way, and that is how I am now going to describe it forever.
Yay. Man, they're working really hard as I'm like hammering beer and like
eating chips.
Yeah. Oh man, thank God.
We're gonna need the loaded nachos. This is a hell of a game.
But also too, and this is a little bit more philosophical, is I don't like anything that is not in my control having that much leverage over my happiness. So what I've seen many times is that if somebody's sports teams wins, they're really happy. If their sports team loses, they're really frustrated, sad, whatever. And I'm like, but you don't have any control over that, right? Despite wearing your special socks or not bathing for 5 days or whatever ritual you have, right? But then, so I never really engaged with it. But then, somebody said, okay, but it's about the narrative, right? It's about the story of the team and how are they doing and all this sort of stuff. And I again, like I crap all over it. But then when somebody said, it's the problem is it's like coming into season 6 of Game of Thrones, right? Is that I'm like, I don't care. And it's like, well, because you haven't really invested in the story up to that point. And I just crapped all over their superstitious thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. But I will roll 4 D20s before picking the D20 that I'm rolling for that particular adventure, because you got to get out the bad rolls and you got to figure out which one's rolling well. I'm a scientist. Like, I should know better. Yeah. But I say that
we
to
all
say
have our superstitions.
I say all that to say, though, that when you are engaging in like a high fantasy narrative, right? Unless they are straying from the norm, they expect for you to know that elves are long-lived and generally pretty magical. They expect for you to know that dwarves are hardy and smiths and things like that. They basically expect you to know the gist of Lord of the Rings, which kind of spawned everything. So I say that to say, I don't think it's unreasonable for them to say, you picked up a baseball game. I'm assuming that I have to teach you how this version of it works, not how baseball works,
So, just to bookend this so I can get this thought out of my head. And I am asking this rhetorically because this would take us even farther afield from the craziness we've already gone on.
Yep.
Will we get to a point where what you just said is true, not of sports games, but of video games? Will we get to a point where a game is like, oh, this is an MMO. You know how those work. Everyone knows how MMOs work, right? This is a fighting game. You know how those work. And the game does nothing to teach you because just like this is a baseball game, they just assume you know the rules of baseball. Like, will we get to a point where video games of certain genres are so entrenched that they go through a similar thing and we become lax about teaching those things? I don't think so, because it's so teaching how the thing works is so inherent to the medium, but it is like a fascinating idea to say like, oh, there's just an evolution of games. I want to.
So we should discuss this more in the post show. This will be our post show discussion. I think we already have. Continue.
Bum, bum, bum.
What?
That's the teaser. That's good.
Yeah, that's the hook. Yeah,
give us $1.
Talk about the fighting guy.
So yeah, we have to talk about the fighting because this is like the thing that's different. This, for me, having a nostalgia experience for this was the heartbreak moment. This was where I got into the first fight because they don't always happen. Like, near as I can tell, what triggers a fight is a runoff. So a runner is trying to get to a base and be safe, and you throw the ball to try and get them out, or if you're the runner, but like, and so if you get there at the same time, normally the expression is tie goes to the runner, right? Which is actually such a euphemism, like from the sports world, that I use that euphemism. Like whenever someone's like, oh, blah, 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 but what about this? What about this? And I'm like, they did it at the same time. Yeah. Tie goes to the runner. Right. And it's like, you can usually just tell from context, like if it's an older kid and a younger kid, you give it to the younger kid because just give them a break. Right. If it's a rich person and a poor person, you give it to the poor person because just give them a break. Right. Like it's always the person who is weaker in the hierarchy.
Right.
And I'm not a sports person, but those things are just so baked into American English that like I use that one all the time. Tie goes to the runner. Well, in this game, tie goes to the survivor, which is cool, right? Because if you are like the first baseman and the hitter is running in, and then you get to the fight and you defeat them, then they are out. If they defeat you, then they are safe. And that adds some of exactly what you were saying, right? That adds some of that like battle chess. The imagined variability is real. In this game. It is actually happening. Problem is the fighting feels like there is no skill involved. It feels completely random. It is over before you even realize what happened. It's just mash the attack button as fast as you can, which somehow does not perform consistently for reasons I was unable to determine. Like there's a stat thing on screen that has like your HP and then a bar, like a number and then a bar, which I think is the same as the numbers. I'm honestly not sure why they're both there, but if they represent different things, I don't know what the other one represents. Does the stronger person always win? Does speed mean that your hits will land and the other person's hits won't? I don't know. I honestly don't know. So every time a fight came up, it was more of just like, I hope I don't break my controller pressing this button as fast as I can because I don't know what else to do. And this isn't, when I win, I'm confused. And when I lose, I'm frustrated. And those are not good choices. Like they're not good choices.
Yeah, no, it's and again, so it may very well be a situation where it's kind of like, oh, well, instead of just tie goes to the runner, it's like, oh, well, there's some variability. But again, if they're giving you the idea that there is agency, then the illusion should stand, right? As opposed to being like, you're telling me that I have an ability to impact the outcome, but I am changing my behavior, and there's no, and I mean, who knows? Maybe it's really, really birth of the rudimentary rubber band physics, right? But again, just like in Mario Party, right? If you can see through it, right, then it's no good. So the interesting thing was that because the visuals in this game, I mean, as we said, like the visuals are pretty good, but they are NES era visuals, right? So I couldn't figure out what triggered a fight. It just happens sometimes,
Right.
Because,
and see, that's another baseball thing. Like you would have immediately noticed, like, oh, it's every time there's a runoff, that's when a fight happens.
Yeah, no, I mean, like to me, I was like, oh, well, to be fair, it took me a while before I kind of realized, oh, okay, when I have the ball and I throw the ball, what direction I'm pointing in says which base to throw it at, right? So if you're hitting like up, then you throw it to second. If you're hitting down, you throw it to home.
Do you put that together on your own?
Yes.
Dude, I struggled with that. I struggled hard. And then once I realized that's what I needed to do, I had a hard time making my thumbs do what I wanted them to do.
That is where I struggled, because the thing is that I'm like, okay, I want him running in this direction. And so you just think, throw, like just throw as fast. And then it wasn't until after I had pressed the throw button, I was like, oh, wait, I was hitting right, which is the first. Fortunately, a lot of the times is that I was either throwing the first or throwing the third, because I was either on the left or the right hand side, depending on where the ball had been hit. And so kind of a 50-50 shot is if I was throwing to first, which is probably where I was going to throw to anyways, so it was kind of working out for me. But to be entirely honest, I did not perform well in this game. No surprises there, right? Which was immediately kind of sapped my like excitement about it, right? So basically is I very first inning, it was like I got struck out, and then they got 5 runs because they got 4 home runs, and I was like, all right, it's fine. And then the next round I got 0 again, and they got 3, and then it was just a complete blowout, right? But the main way that I was able to get people out was to either strike them out or catch the ball. Like I don't think I rarely, if ever, got somebody out because I threw to the base, the appropriate base. It was just kind of, all right, I'm just going to keep doing this until you pop enough flies for me to catch them, or until I strike you out, one or the other.
And which means you probably went ages before you saw a fight.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. I mean, and so then because of that, it was very jarring when I saw one, because all of a sudden I threw there and I was like, what is happening? And I lost. And I was like, oh, so this is a thing that can happen. Okay. I have no idea why it's happening. And then it only happened maybe at half a dozen more times, where again, so every time I was like, I don't know. Sometimes, and to me, I related it to hockey, where I'm like, sometimes they just fight each other. So I mean, maybe I knew that that's not a thing in baseball, but I was like, maybe that's what they're trying to pull in is a hockey kind of thing. So I did not puzzle out that was the correlation between that. But that does touch on my note on game gets a lot of home runs. Did it get as many home runs for you? I was getting home runned on all the time.
So I got home run on a lot until I realized the AI in this is not super sophisticated. And so when you when you are pitching, so when you're the field team, you can like charge up your pitch. And I actually forgot to mention this. This is one of the cool details. Some batters, when you charge up your pitch, they kind of like shake a little, like, oh man, he's really gonna let her rip. And I was just like, oh, that's cute. Like that's just,
I like that
cute little detail. When you are pitching, you can hold the directional buttons or even change them to throw it high, throw a sinker, throw a curveball, right? Like they don't all have to be like straight down the plate, and you can move left and right. So like you can move way to the side of the pitcher's mound and then throw like a stupid ass diagonal pitch. And it's probably going to be a ball, but if you swing on a ball, it still counts as a strike. Like, even if it was a completely wild pitch, if you swing the bat, it still counts as a strike. So there's like an element, I don't know how sophisticated it is in the game, but there's an element of like, can I goad them into swinging on this thing that otherwise would have been a ball? And then if they do manage to hit it somehow, because it was so oddly placed, it'll like probably go foul, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is very baseball. I didn't stress test a lot of it because once I realized that if you pitch exclusively sinkers, they basically cannot get home runs anymore. I was like,
nice.
Oh, well, I guess I've now
first order optimal strategy.
Yeah, just solve this problem. So every pitch was just a full speed holding down so that it would sink. And it's really, the curveballs and stuff are really obvious because they move horizontally, but the sinkers are moving vertically. So it's a lot harder to tell that that's happening. But I know that that's a kind of pitch in baseball. So they still hit it, but it never even gets into the outfield. So the pitcher or the shortstop or whoever would just run over and grab it, throw it to first. And so I went from like I would hit a bunch of home runs, they would hit a bunch of home runs, to us just brutalizing each other. Just every single hit was, it would roll 10 feet. It would get thrown to first, and then there's a runoff, so there would be a fight. So like at first I was playing this like kind of boring reskinned baseball game, and then I was playing the most lengthy, complicated menu select for Street Fighter ever made. Like just super, super bizarre and uncomfortable. And that's what made me get exposed to the fighting a lot and realize how jank and unfun the fighting is. Like, honestly, I was less frustrated by getting a million home runs on me than going into a fight where I felt like I had no agency.
Right. Well, and also too, when the fight itself is not fun, right? Because if all you're doing is sitting there hammering attack as fast as possible, and then you lose, and you're like, oh my God, you know what it is? It's your Spinel.
Oh, I was gonna say Golden Axe, but okay.
It's like Golden Axe, but it's the happily waiting night after night. Is this how it works? Am I doing it right? Like you're just sitting there like, am I doing it? Am I playing the game? Like, is this how it's supposed to work? And it was not fun for Spinel. It was not fun for me. Yeah. What else do you got?
Honestly, the only two other things I wanted to make sure I mentioned are, one is a kind of a throwaway note, is just when you play the Pennant and you're playing by yourself, so you're the only human player, there's like 6 other teams, and they're all CPU controlled. And when you play a Pennant, you're playing like it's a tournament, right? So sometimes the teams that you're not have to play against each other, and they make you watch. They make you watch. They make you watch the CPU game. So you said if this was real, the robots would just do the math. No, apparently not.
Nope.
So
not in this universe.
Nope. They just make you watch. And I'm trying to be as generous as possible. The only idea I could come up with is maybe it's so you can see, like, that's the demo. Like, see how the game is played. Watch the CPU play against the CPU. But one, I feel like that's an overly generous interpretation. And two, at least give me like a skip. Like, go ahead, start playing it. But then if I press start or B or hold start and B or something, like, just let me skip it and just tell me who won, because I want to play the game. I don't want to watch the game play the game.
Yeah, watching a game masturbate is always a little weird. One thing that I think is a missed opportunity in that regard is it would have been cool if there were 3 options, right? One, watch it if you want to. I mean, that's cool. Maybe do dishes, have it on in the background, like just like you would with a baseball game. Because I assumed that you would never actually just watch one, like you got to be doing something else, I assume. That 2, you're right, just straight up skip, right? Or 3, what if it gave you the transcript of the game like a robot would, right? Where it just kind of like, because all they'd have to do is basically just throw the code on there and kind of say, instead of like animating it, just say, person A pitching, person B hitting, strike, hit,
like if you were reading the transcript of a radio broadcast.
Right. But I mean, it would just be I would assume negligible effort to do that, because it would basically kind of just say whatever the code was that we wrote, just put the code up there because they're robots. So it's just kind of like, oh, or, you can see what the robots coded for you, so I just think that would have been a nice way to, if it's like, because it's, you can either watch the thing wholesale, skip it entirely, or if you are kind of interested in how the game played out, you can just view the transcript of the game really quickly, so that just kind of feels like a missed opportunity.
I feel like if you wanted to video game this up, where it's like, we're trying to teach you how to play this game through the game, is what you do is you skip fine, let people watch the game or skip it. But then when the game is over, there's a little summary that's like soft hints about why the outcome may have been what the outcome was. So like, oh, the Cincinnati Magenta robots really beat the crap out of the Florida Blue robots. That pitcher sure has a modified howitzer for an arm, right? Like, and it's like, oh, so this game was very low scoring, and they are attributing it to the prowess of the pitcher. I now know that having a better pitcher is important in the game of baseball, like, right? Or something like, oh, it's like this guy, like, he's a crappy hitter, but he's so fast. And it's like, oh, now I know that if my characters are fast enough, they don't have to be good hitters because they're just fast enough to get safely one base at a time and come home. And that's all I care about, is just scoring more runs than the other guy. And how can I make that happen? So I don't know, like, it's a video game. Like, you have perfect opportunity to just write some canned crap, and then after a game automatically plays out, like the CPU plays against the CPU, just attribute that victory to a factor that actually played into that team being victorious, which because you're the game.
Right. Well, and also too, it is a computerized version of a game played by in-universe computerized versions of people, right? So you can be as meta as you want with it, and just be like, do you want to look under the hood and see how the game is played? Because that's just like you're looking under the hood of your robots and seeing how they're programmed, So it's to your point, is that, there's a million opportunities to kind of lean into the lore and make the game more teachable, more approachable to everyone, but also for people who aren't as up on baseball. That, again, I just think that they were like, oh no, baseball, but with robots. Isn't that cool? And it's like, yeah. But you know what it is that phrase means something different now than it did 20 years ago, right?
30, my dude.
Oh, no. So old. So basically 30 years ago is when somebody said baseball, but with robots. You're like, oh, cool, baseball reskinned with robots. But now we'd be like, baseball with robots. Think about all of the cool, fun stuff you could do with that premise. And it's like, no, so when you say, oh, I'm disappointed because it's just baseball, but with robot skins, that I think was, if you had just said that, it'd just be a tone difference. It was just like when I hit human weird before, right? It's now it's like, oh, it's just baseball, but reskinned with robots. Before it's like, it's baseball, but reskinned with robots, and that was enough,
Yep. The only other thing is the outfielder AI sucks. I consistently lost runs because when the outfielder is off screen, they're being controlled by the computer. And once they're on screen, they hand control over to you. But because you completely unceremoniously, and you don't know where they are coming from, right? So the camera is following the trajectory of the ball perfectly, I might add, right? It never really goes off screen, like it sticks right with it. So you don't know, is your outfielder coming in from stage left? Are they coming in from stage right? Are they going to drop in from the sky or burrow up from underground? Like, I don't know, but it's going to matter because the second they get on screen, a little arrow appears over their head and they are now my problem. So if they were heading screen right, I need to be pressing right. Otherwise, they're going to awkwardly come to a stop until I press a button and then they will resume motion, which is often enough to make you miss a fly ball, right? So there were a lot of times where the computer scored runs and I was just thinking in these like two meta layers where I was like, okay, in terms of conveying the information necessary to be successful in baseball, this is an F-. Like, I have no idea where I, the outfielder, am. So that's playing real baseball or even just watching real baseball, you would not have that problem because you have a view of the whole damn field. So it's like this, just as a baseball thing, this is a catastrophic failure. As a video game thing, there could be HUDs, there could be little arrows on the edge of the screen that's like, this is the direction relative to the ball where your outfielders are, right? And like the bigger the arrow, the closer they are to coming onto the screen. Or, you know, lean into some of that robot stuff and put some robot stuff up there that indicates, hey, the robots know where the other robots are, because robots are robots. Also, they're on the field and they can literally see each other. Like, there's so many ways you could do something that's legitimately baseball. You could do something that's video gamey baseball. You could do something that's robot-y video gamey baseball. And they just opted for none of them. And that's incredibly frustrating and led to a lot of, oh, I guess I now have control over this outfielder. He's already gotten a third base. So by the time I get over there and pick up the ball is...
Well, and it's interesting because I had the exact same problem. To the point where my note was, you know, you either catch the ball or you don't, you know, like, cause it's literally, cause many, I think of The Simpsons when I think of this, but you know, it's just, I imagine they're just standing there in the outfield with their arm up and
yes, just waiting.
And that's the thing though, is that like, because I found where I was playing it of what decision would I regret the least, in the sense of like, if I'm doing something and because I'm doing something, I arrest their momentum, right? Because what would happen a lot of times is they'd be running to the ball and then they would come on screen and I just assumed they were coming from a different direction. So I would move them away from the ball,
yes,
you know?
Many times.
Yeah. So I was like, I hated it when that happened. I didn't like it when I did nothing and the ball just landed near them and then I went and picked it up. But I liked that less than me screwing it up. So basically, when they would pop it out to a long fly out to the outfield, I just let it happen. And sometimes it landed in their mitt and sometimes it didn't. But that was, I didn't have any agency. And I think that's one of the things that I realized very early through my playthrough that is not what you want, which is that I, in particular, in this playthrough had so little agency that I just didn't invest, you know? So I was like, look, they'll either catch it or they won't. And if they don't, then I'll just, they'll get on base and, you know, and then I will try to strike them out again, or they'll get a home run and they will score. I am not going to win. I probably won't even score, you know, but I will continue to do this and diligently take notes and then talk about the game. But I mean, at no point was winning like a possibility for me. So yeah. So when that was happening, I was just like, all right, you know, whatever happens, man, burn it down.
So, I mean, we might as well ask the question now if we haven't given away the game yet. I mean, full nostalgia card was required, no question. But what's honestly so weirdly disappointing about this, my personal investment aside, right? Like, I was bummed that this thing I had fond memories of turns out to kind of suck. But the game sucks on its own terms because it's not a very good baseball game. Like, it's a NES era game where they did nothing to make it more accessible, right? There's no HUD, there's nothing to make up for the fact that you're not on the field where you have your field of vision. Like, you have the tight field of view and you get none of the tools they could have afforded you because it's a video game. And they make no effort to lean into the 80s cyberpunk robot thing beyond the fighting, which feels incredibly poorly executed. So honestly, if this was just a baseball game without the fighting element, it would be less offensive because then it would just be a mediocre baseball game for the Nintendo. But the fact that it's a mediocre baseball game and it's a mediocre, like, sport what if game is maddening. Like, it's just like, how?
No, this isn't Madden. This is baseball.
So I am personally disappointed, which is always frustrating. But I can't recommend this game on its own merits because there are probably better NES baseball games. Like, if you really wanted to play an 8-bit baseball game for some reason, there are probably better choices without leaving the Nintendo, let alone if you were like, I don't want to play a hyper realistic, I want like a fun, weird game. I guarantee there are better, fun, weird baseball games than this one. So sadly, I must say, Base Wars, full nostalgia goggles required, no question. Skip playing the game entirely. Just go listen to the OST that I put in the show notes.
I'll back you on that. Full nostalgia goggles required. I think that kind of the point that I feel you were making is that and kind of what I said before is that this game means something different to us now than it meant at the time, right? So, I'm confident that all they set out to do was, reskin a baseball game with cool robots, and hey, look, this guy, when he shoots, he does a Mega Man shot instead of like a baseball throw. Like that's kind of cool, right? And then that was all we needed back then, man. It was a simpler time, right? Now we're like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if, and what if this, and again, because the coding would be relatively easy. I mean, somebody's probably made it. There's probably somebody, who could just sit there and an indie game developer and say like, yeah, what if robots, So it doesn't do anything that is particularly noteworthy, is particularly interesting, or is particularly fun from my seat. So as far as games go, they're out.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day.